Don't expect me to sing for this review. Sorry. Ain't gonna happen, Captain.
Let's get out of here.
Not the slightest suspicion that we're not giving the people what they want.
It's okay, baby. Let's give the people what they want.
So Joker, Folie A Deux, or as some people will call it, such as my guy Doomblazer, Folie A Deux has finally released in theaters, and I want to talk about my thoughts on this. Now, before I dive into the sequel to 2019's mega hit Joker, I want to discuss briefly my opinions and thoughts on the film that came out before it. When I first saw Joker back in 2019, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was great. And a big part of that is because of Joaquin Phoenix's performance as Arthur Fleck, aka Joker. He carried that movie on his shoulders, and he earned that Oscar for a reason. He brought a new take on the Joker that was unique and different, but also staying true to what the Clown Prince of Crime represents. It also delved into themes that other superhero and comic book movies don't really talk about these days, which is poverty, mental health, social inequality, and I thought at that time it tackled it really well. However, when I rewatched it for the sequel, it didn't hold up as well as it did when I first saw it. The themes and story didn't hit me as hard as it did when I first saw it, but I still think it's a great movie and just an interesting watch for anybody who's interested. So when a sequel was announced for this, I was 50-50. On one hand, I get to see Phoenix performance again. He was a great Joker. I love him. So more of him is great. Like, I'm not going to complain about that. On the other, it doesn't really feel like it's necessary. It just, with how the first Joker movie was, it felt the way it ended and how it all went together. It felt very one and done. Like, it didn't feel like the story needed to continue from how that movie ended. But I was still cautiously optimistic because it's an Elseworld story. It can do whatever the heck it wants. And also, Lady Gaga's Harley Quinn was a very interesting casting choice, in my opinion. And I wanted to see how this goes. Even when I heard that this movie was going to be a kind of musical, that didn't discourage me or lessen my excitement for it or anything like that. Because again, I was still intrigued and wanted to see what kind of ideas they would put into it, despite not being the biggest fans of musicals myself. And normally with a movie like this, heck, any movie in general, I normally try to stay away from reviews and what critics say before I see it myself, because I don't want their opinions or their statements influence my viewing experience for this. So naturally, I stayed away from the negative reviews and the criticisms this film had before leading up to my viewing of this. And man, and I hate being that guy, I agree with many criticisms people have of this movie, and I probably should have listened to those reviewers. Let's look at the positives. The two big factors that made the first movie work for me thankfully carried over into this one. One of them being Phoenix's portrayal as Joker. He is still a great Joker, and I still think he's in the top 3 for live-action Joker actors. He still brings a presence to him and brings a new dynamic to what was seen in the previous movie. And they take him in new routes that we haven't seen the Clown Prince of Crime go through yet on the big screen. And despite the poor writing, which I will get into in a moment, Phoenix does what he can and salvages it as much as possible, and was still the acting highlight for me in this movie. And this also carries over into the female lead of the movie, Lady Gaga, which I will get into in just a bit. Both of them had great chemistry and had great bouncing off from one another and complement each other's acting skills very well. And the other big thing that carried over from the first one that made it work for me was the cinematography and just how everything looks. Every scene and setting in this movie has a visual standout for me, whether it be the courtroom or the shady, shadowy, dark corridors and hallways of Arkham. Every environment and setting has a unique tone, lighting, and almost a character in of itself. And and just is one of the few highlights of this film. And I would honestly consider this one of the best made bad movies I've seen in a while, if ever. On the other side of the leads is Lady Gaga as Lee, aka Harley Quinn, and she had great chemistry with Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, and was also straight up the best singer in this movie, which is not really saying much because she's a natural gifted musician and she has a lot of great music. And not for the movie, but just in general. She plays a Harley Quinn that's drastically different from what audiences are used to, and definitely a departure from what we're used to seeing from Margot Robbie in the DCEU. Whereas in that version of Harley, she's fully in love with the Joker, like the person, and Joker just manipulated her into loving him. This movie plays it a little differently. Instead, Harley was in love with the idea of Joker, but when Arthur denounces the identity of the Joker, which we'll unfortunately get into later, she rejects him and just doesn't find him fun or attractive anymore. It kind of reminds me of Black Cat and Spider-Man's relationship, where Felicia Hardy, aka Black Cat, was more in love with the Spider-Man persona, but not so much the Peter Parker side. So it reminded me a lot of that. Unfortunately, the bad greatly outshines the good in this movie. To begin with, I don't mind that it was a musical, even though I'm not the biggest fan of that genre. It's just the way it was done here was just so clumsy, incoherent, and random, and it just felt completely unnecessary. This movie also has a severe identity crisis, in my opinion. One moment, it's a courtroom drama where Arthur is facing the consequences of his actions he did in the first movie, which was killing 5 people on live television, one of the 6 if we're including his mother, and just causing riots and pandemonium and certain people reacting negatively to it. But on the other, they try to make it a love story where it delves into his psyche, and how he conveys that love he has for Lee is through song and musical numbers that just don't really work for me. Honestly, if they just made it a straight up courtroom drama, I would have been more into it, because the idea of having a supervillain in a movie going through court and just facing the actions that he or she had took and how it harmed and affected numerous people sounds like an interesting concept to me, but unfortunately this just doesn't do it. I mean, imagine a movie where you can see Joker on trial. It could work. It could be great. Heck, it could have been even amazing. But like I said, this movie just failed at it, and it just made it extremely boring and long, drawn out, and didn't really produce the results that I wouldn't want to see. Also, the writing is just all over the place in this movie. There's just plot holes galore. Nothing really makes sense in it, despite, being a Joker movie where his mind and his narration is not super accurate or reliable. It's just the stuff that's shown in the real world outside of the musical numbers and outside of the fantasies. Nothing adds up. Like how the Arkham guards just let Lee in Joker's solitary cell just by asking and not really showing how that happens or giving the reason why they let that happen. And just certain actions and reactions characters make just don't really add up with how they are supposed to be written or portrayed. And how Arthur was written in the first movie just felt completely different and inconsistent what was established in this one. In the first movie, it was obvious that he is just crazy, is a psycho, and doesn't have a split personality that they established in Folie A Deux. I do commend the writers and Todd Phillips for trying to do a pseudo-meta commentary from the first movie by having Harley and Joker's fans be a representation of how people reacted to the first movie, on how they say like, oh, it's the greatest thing ever, it's a masterpiece, and the response it was given from there. And then Arthur himself is trying to shake off that celebrity mentality and just how his fans view him and how Harley views him. But when he shakes it off, the Joker identity, and accepts himself as Arthur again, it didn't feel natural at all. And it just made me more confused and befuddled on what I just watched. Which all culminates into a climax that just fell flat for me and completely undermines and undoes everything that first movie set up. And do not get me started on how this movie ends. It just completely undermines and undoes everything the first movie set up. And it was just baffling, confusing, and just not really putting me in a good spot of wanting to see more. And I doubt we'll see more because it doesn't look like it's doing super well in the box office. And it just feels like they just made it as a cash grab and a way to just replicate the success of 2019's Joker.
I want to see the real you.
Yeah, this movie was not good. I was greatly let down by this, and I desperately wanted to like this with the neat ideas and interesting concept that they were going for, just not executing great or right at all. And despite the great performances, cinematography, and visuals this movie produced, it's not worth the pain to take to go see. Heck, the theater that me and my group of friends went to, it was just us. The theater was completely empty. That alone should tell you the quality this film has. I unfortunately give Joker Folie A Deux a low, staggering 4 out of 10. What do you guys think? Did this push you guys to not see this movie? What are your thoughts on the first one? Let me know down in the Australia box in the comments section. Check out my socials in the description. And if you want to check out my full written review on Substack, the link is down there as well. And hopefully better movies are on the way, and the DCU and Matt Reeves takes on the Clown Prince of Crime will put a better taste in our mouths and hopefully let us forget this one. But anyway, that's all I got for you guys this week. Take care, and don't forget to smile.
Good night. And always remember, that's